even though you're trying to get out of it, you still get sucked back in. Like I can recall like for hundreds of conversations where I was like, I cannot do this with you anymore. We are not going to do this. And then both of us, or I would get sucked back in. Always found myself in tears. I just remember having like these vivid memories of me just like crying on the plane. And at that point I realized this is really harmful to me. Like if I'm crying all the time, I don't feel understood. I don't feel seen. Like something has to shift.
Alrighty, welcome back, ladies. I'm so excited to interview Gabby. Gabby is a relationship coach, helping women who are single attract the right man into their life. And the reason I have Gabby on is because she has actually been in or had experiences of being the other woman. And so she can relate like never before of one, being the other woman, and also who she had to become to stop attracting uncommitted men or these situationships so she could start attracting a healthy relationship into her life. So perfect person to be interviewing. Welcome, Gabby. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation because it's just so relatable. And yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yes, absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you do so women are filled in and aware of your expertise.
Yeah, so I'm a dating coach for singles looking for love. They have been working on themselves. They've, read the books, they've done the online courses, they've done the therapy, but they still feel hopeless about love. So they're either afraid that they're never going to find their person or they're not going to feel good enough for love. But I help them understand themselves a lot better, feel confident in who they are so that they can find someone to share their life with.
Yes, awesome. I love it. And this is really a perfect place for where these women are in because it's a sticky situation and it is very painful. And I'm sure like a lot of the people that you work with have gone through so much pain and they're like, I don't want this anymore. I want to be able to be in a healthy, committed relationship. And so we're going to be talking about all of that today and why we get into these situations and how we can adapt and shift some of the parts in us so we can start attracting that into our life, or those feelings that it creates into our life. So let's just start a little bit back to give a little bit of context of where you've come from. You tell us a bit more about you started attracting situationships. And you also had an experience with dating a married man. Tell us a little bit more about those experiences in your life.
Yeah, so I've definitely been, and this has happened for decades. So being, in the friend zone, never really getting hit on whenever I went out, always being kind of like this friend with benefit. Like I would always have best friends. And then they would act like boyfriends. And this happened for years. Or I have not been in a relationship with someone who is married. However, I have been the other woman in two scenarios for like years. Like one was 8 years. And then the other one was like about maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
And those were really heartbreaking because it always felt like we were friends. Like there was that sense of like love and respect. But then of course there was this factor of, oh, I am the other person. I am the other woman.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm like trying to recall these scenarios because they're just so like near and dear to my heart. They were like really painful. I also remember there were times where they were single but we still didn't end up together. So I think like after being in situationships or being the other woman for a handful of years and them breaking up with the person that they were with and we still weren't together, I think that's when I started to realize, oh, like they're not going to choose me. Like this is going to be more hurtful than it is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in it, it's so hard to create change because there's so many of these unconscious ties that are pulling you towards that person. Tell me what had to change or what changed in you in order to take that leap and start shifting that particular, like if we're going to talk about the 8-year relationship, I know there was so many elements in you that shifted and we're going to go over all of those. With those kind of situations, what shifted in you to be able to walk away from it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was definitely more than one moment. I mean, there was just so many countless days and nights where I would cry all the time. Like, and also at one point in the 4-year situation, I actually moved to another state to like, okay, well, I'm going to create space between us to the point where we can't do anything physical. And, you know, we still had that emotional connection. So every time I would go back home, though, I always found myself in tears. I just remember having like these vivid memories of me just like crying on the plane. And at that point, I realized this is really harmful to me. Like if I'm crying all the time, I don't feel understood. I don't feel seen, like something has to shift.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to acknowledge like these relationships can feel really sticky. Like it feels like you don't have a choice. Like your heart wants what your heart wants. And you want nothing more to be with that person. So it feels like this is the only option.
Yeah.
And also it might even feel like even though you're trying to get out of it, you still get sucked back in. Like I can recall like for hundreds of conversations where I was like, I cannot do this with you anymore. We are not going to do this. And then both of us, or I would get sucked back in. Yeah. And so I also started to notice like there was a point where things shifted, where I was no longer willing to just go with that flow or being dragged by that undertow. I actually realized that this was not the best fit for me, but I was still going back and back and back. Yeah. And so I think also being in that phase where I was like, I know that this is not what I want, but my heart keeps going back. And so it kind of also felt like relapsing. So that's when I started to realize, is this like a love addiction? Am I feeling like I have no choice in the matter? And so if we're even going to analyze like our thoughts, so, well, there's two things that we can talk about here. There's what we don't know about like romantic and physical attraction, what we aren't taught, and then also like the beliefs that we have about ourselves. So to be candid, some of the beliefs that I had about myself were like, I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of not being chosen. This might be the best that I can ever get. If he can't give me commitment, will anyone else be able to get me commitment? Probably not, right? Like that was like the mindset that I had. Yeah. And then also at that time, I had a different definition of love than I do now. Like for me, we first learn how to love when we're younger from our caregivers, from our parents. And at the time, I learned that love was hard. Love was complicated. Love was challenging. It was something that you had to overcome to prove that your relationship was worth it. Yeah. And so, of course, I found myself in situations where I was waiting to be chosen, or things are really complicated. And so there is a level of familiarity. So there's like safety because that's familiar, but then there's also this layer of I'm doing harm to myself because I'm crying, I'm not feeling understood, I'm not getting my needs met.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the women listening to this will honestly be loving this. Tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned we're attracted to these situations because of 4 types of fear. Can you tell us more about why we attract these relationships into our life based on subconscious fear within us?
Yes. Before I get into the 4 types of fear, it's also really helpful to know a little bit more about attraction. So this was kind of like the game changer for me. So like in addition to changing my beliefs, but I started learning more about like intimacy and relationships and attraction. What we don't learn, which is so unfortunate, is that attraction can actually be changed. Of course, this doesn't mean settling, and this isn't with force. It's really about knowing ourselves, getting clear on our beliefs so that we can like mold it with love and kind of change who we're interested in. Yeah. That said, I also want to say, because this gets either we might miscommunicated, or it is either intended by certain people in like the dating space of like, you know, you need to attract the right fit partner. And to that I say, like, it's not your fault that you're in these situations. Like, it's not something that you are worthy of. It's not something that's your fault. So I just want to make that clear. And then I'll kind of go into like why we're attracted to the people that we are attracted to. So, well, first things first, we can change who we're attracted to. I know that that's seems really counterintuitive, because a lot of what we hear is you can't help who you love, you can't change who you're interested in.
Yeah.
So going into the psychology around it, so Harville Hendricks is a psychotherapist, and in the family and marriage therapy space.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about how we are consciously attracted to the positive qualities in our love interest, and we are also subconsciously attracted to the negative qualities. And by negative, it's the things that hurt us the most, but also there's, again, this sense of familiar, like I'm familiar with this type of pain. So like, for example, you might have someone who is really affectionate in your life, but maybe they don't prioritize you. Maybe they prioritize work or another relationship before you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like this sense of like, oh, like they are really loving and affectionate, and that feels really positive. But then also I'm not being picked. I'm not in a committed relationship with that. So it's like this sense of like something that's really sexy and alluring, but also causes a lot of pain. So that can be really confusing.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give an example, like for your own childhood? You mentioned quite a few significant circumstances happened, and that can really shape who this exact theory.
Yeah. And again, also, this is not like blaming our parents or our caregivers.
Yeah.
It's really trying to understand, well, what was my environment like? What was I exposed to get a deeper understanding of myself, and also like being compassionate to like our parents, maybe like everyone's doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. But again, it's like reflecting on like what happened back then that's, at play now. Like, what are some beliefs or stories that I have, or some conditioning that I've inherited that is no longer serving me. So let's see. I mean, growing up, I heard a lot from my family that I was really sensitive. So my family, how they dealt with problems were they either ignored them, they didn't express any emotions or feelings, or if we had conflict, the next day they would pretend like nothing happened. It was very much like, let's sweep things under the rug. And then I also noticed in my romantic partners, that was very much the case, where anytime that there was conflict, it was like the end all be all. Like it felt like they were either going to leave, or if I had any type of emotional needs, it felt like that was a burden to them. I couldn't have any feelings about certain things. And so it's just, even though I dated different people, the same emotional challenges came up. Sure, there was different flavors of it because everyone is different, but reflecting on the people that I dated, I started to notice patterns and similarities between a handful of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, one more thing, there's just so many things to share, Kate. The reason also why it's so difficult to shake these attractions is because part of us also thinks it's like a noble pursuit. Like we want to go back to where we've been wronged. We want to rewrite history. And so part of us is living in the present, being like, if they finally pick me, if they finally choose me, then that will mean that I'm worthy, or that will mean that I'm lovable.
Yeah.
So that's also why it's so hard to shake this or to shift it. And so if you're in this position, know that it's really challenging to do that. And also, in addition to like the psychology around it, so like you want to go back to the scene of the crime and fix things. So there's that reason. But then also, in terms of like behavior theory, so I'm a behavioral therapist, done a lot of behavioral psychology, and what we call like irregular reinforcement schedules, like that sounds really like it's like a really like technical term, but like basically if you think of like a slot machine, or even if you think of like social media, you go on social media and you don't know whether or not you're going to feel distressed or you're going to feel really happy and excited. So like you either are going to get positively reinforced or negatively reinforced, but you just don't know. And that type of reinforcement schedule is really addicting. Same thing with love. Like, oh, they're really affectionate. Oh, they bought me flowers, or they planned this really nice vacation where we were able to just like be ourselves and relaxed. but then like a couple days later, it's like, I don't hear from them, or they're not leaving their partner, or I don't feel like a priority. So again, it's like, there's things that are keeping you around, and then there's also things that really hurt you. And that's why it's also really hard to leave. Because this is like, our dopamine's being triggered, that's also in charge of like our craving. So we like crave the other person.
Which is where the addiction links kick in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so hard. It's just, I'm trying to say, like, you're not alone. This stuff is really hard. Do you want me to go into fear now?
And I think, and I want to add to that. It's okay. I think when people, like a lot of the women haven't voiced what they're going through to anyone, or they've voiced it to their best friend, and hearing the words come out of their mouth, often they feel so much shame, and hearing the words come out of their mouth, they're like, this sounds stupid. This sounds ridiculous. Like, why? Like the friend's reaction would be like, well, that's not working, so maybe just get out of that kind of situation. And even the words coming out of your mouth, you kind of feel the same thing. Like, this sounds silly, but you just don't get it. And so there's so much more deeper going on underneath the surface, which is what we're discussing with you. It's okay that you're going through this. There is a lot more at the subconscious level, and that has created this experience in your life, or attracted.
Yeah. And then there's at some level of feeling safe because that's familiar to you, because anything that's foreign is going to be seen as unfamiliar, which is uncertain, which is going to cause fear, which is like
Absolutely.
the perfect transition. Right?
Perfect segue.
Yeah. So the thing about fear is we all experience this. And so I also want to say, every human, if we're living and breathing, like, we have a fear of intimacy, like we have a fear of love. Of course, that's going to depend on our past experiences or past traumas. Like, everyone's going to have a different relationship to that trauma or fear, but just know that you're not alone. I hear this a lot with like singles who are looking for love, or like, I feel like I'm the only one that has, issues finding love. Everyone else has this figured out but me. So like, I hear you, like, a lot of like that, holding on to that shame can feel really heavy and isolating. And so I just want to say, like, you're not alone. And then also what we can do, the thing that we can do is identify how fear is showing up in our lives. Like, if we know that fear will show up, like, we're human, we're afraid of a lot of things in our career and our life and in love.
Yeah.
We can start to normalize that. Like, oh, okay, fear is part of the human condition. That is okay. It's not about being fearless. Instead, it's about what you do with the fear. So what you do with the fear is ultimately going to determine who you become and how you show up in the world. So it's really helpful to know when you're afraid. And there's 4 types of fears. I got this from my coach, Kate Swoboda. She is awesome. She talks about the 4 types of fear, and I actually applied it specifically to dating. So there's perfectionism, there's being a martyr or people pleaser, there's self-sabotage, and then there's pessimism. So the reason why we're labeling these things is, again, not to at all shame you, but instead to empower you, because when we label these things, we can start noticing them, be compassionate towards ourselves, and then choose something differently if we would like to. Again, I can relate to all of these. Like, you can gravitate towards one, you can gravitate towards all. Like, know that you can be on the spectrum here. So like, for perfectionism, it's, you feel like, the beliefs that you have about yourself might be, I need to be perfect in order to be loved. I need to be healed in order to be loved. Or everything needs to go according to plan. So maybe like romanticism is involved, like you have everything mapped out and everything needs to fit into that plan. Another thing too is maybe there's an aversion to having insecurities or being a human or having emotions, right? So then you feel like you need to be overly positive, you need to keep things bottled in, and you want to like hold it in and not tell anyone that you're either feeling a certain way or feeling insecure or whatever. Right? So there's this need for perfection. And then for the martyr, people pleasing, there's this relentless self-sacrifice. like you're always catering to other people's needs. It's really difficult for you to take care of yourself. You're always quick to say yes. It's hard to say no. You also might find yourself in a parent or therapist role in your relationship. So you're either constantly taking care of your partner, or you are the therapist for your partner. You're constantly offering a listening ear, and it's also like one-sided.
Yeah.
In terms of self-sabotage,
which I just want to add to that one.
Yeah.
A lot of inner child work around that is having a parent that had addiction tendencies. And so that can be manifesting in this relationship in your adult life. You're recreating that.
Yeah. Or yes, and that. And like for me too, for people pleasing, it's realizing, oh, I struggled to take up space in my family.
Yeah.
And so like I had to shrink myself in order to be accepted, or like this watered down version of me.
Yeah.
I needed to show up that way and have like no needs. I needed to take care of everyone else. A lot of my family members, either intentionally or unintentionally, they take up a lot of space. It's like very much about them, what they need, what their schedule's like. And so a way to protect and preserve myself, I learned, okay, I need to constantly cater to other people.
Yeah.
So know that there are reasons why we behave this way, and it's not because something's wrong with you or because you're broken. It's not at all. It's usually these things come into play because we are trying to protect ourselves in a way that we know how.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, I need to people please in order to be accepted, or I need to be perfect. I need to succeed in my life in order to get recognition. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like it's the motivating factor is I need to do this to be loved. So
100%. Yeah. And it's natural to adapt to the opposite polarity of the people around you.
Exactly. So like self-sabotage, which is, I feel like my dominant one, which is very much like the grass is greener on the other side, romanticizing what I didn't have. It was so hard to finish anything, whether it was like a hobby or a book or even relationships. I would get really excited about someone in the beginning, super gung-ho. And then as time went on, it would just fade. I would just be like, oh, I'm so bored. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
So like bouncing from person to person, I've been known as a serial monogamist, which is nothing wrong with that. But I also noticed for me personally, I struggled being alone. So I would jump from relationship to relationship.
Yeah.
Then also I was really afraid of commitment. So that was a scary thing. And then the last one is like pessimism, which I also have. I'm very familiar with this. It's very much like, oh, no one wants commitment anymore. I might as well stay with what I have. Like, this is the only opportunity that I'm going to get to find someone. I need to stay. There are no good men out there. There are good, or whoever you're into, like, there's no good people out there, or it just never works out for me. So very much this like pessimistic voice of like, what's the point of trying?
Yeah. Which cuts us off from the opportunity of actually seeking different. It's easy to like just paint that story, and then that story is the story. But when we seek to explore other beliefs, and then we're tapping into the fear.
Yeah. So it's like, well, what can we do with the fear? Right.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so dependent on, well, one, who you are, where you're at, and what is it you actually need. So these are going to be very like general recommendations. And I can also even share questions. So like, for example, if we're thinking about being a perfectionist, you might ask yourself, like, why am I afraid of being imperfect? What happens if I let go of control? What am I afraid will happen?
Yeah.
If you're someone who gravitates or resonates with like the martyr or people pleasing, maybe it's asking the question, why am I scared to say no? What happens when I have needs? For self-sabotagers, ask yourself, why does commitment scare me? If I go all in, what am I afraid will be found out? Right. Yeah. And then for pessimism, it's what's scary about realizing that I have power and choice in this situation. Right. And even like thinking about an answer to that, it sounds like, or it could be like, this is one of my answers is like, I was afraid to trust myself. I was afraid to trust my gut feelings. I was afraid to make decisions. So if I removed responsibility or realizing that I had choice in the situation, then I'm able to just let, everyone, like, there's no point in changing men. I can't do anything about it. So I'm like removing myself from the solution.
Yeah.
So then it's asking the question, well, what happens? What's scary about actually making choices, or what's scary about realizing I have choice here? Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think to add to that, so we often have a lot of references to back up that fear. And so to add into that exercise, I would add, so you've got all the references naturally that back up that fear is right. And so you've got all these experiences that back that fear up, but also references of where you have made decisions in your life and they have been epic. And so that you're really backing up where it is safe to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Building that belief up.
And that is a process, just like you said. It's putting yourself in situations where you can learn how to trust yourself, which can be really challenging, because I'm trying to, like, what is an example of this? For me, when I chose people that were unavailable or wouldn't commit to me, this is like the story that I crafted. So I would say, see, Gabby, you don't know how to pick them. This person is not trustworthy. They're not picking you. Maybe you're not cut out for this. And so that was something that I kept, like, that was like nonstop in my head of like, see, you're not trustworthy. See, like, you're going to disappoint yourself. So like, don't make any decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like easy to get caught in the story, that narrative, like, oh, I'm not trustworthy. And the way to shift out of that, what really helps is like knowing yourself, like, again, asking yourself these questions. Why am I afraid of commitment? And then answers, that's not going to reveal itself overnight. It's like going to be a process. But for me, I started to realize that commitment was something that I was ashamed of. And that's also, especially with like hookup culture. And then I'm not shaming hookup culture. If that's what you want to do, totally cool. I realized that wasn't for me. We get messages around like, don't care, like, you're needy, you're desperate if you want commitment. Don't show that you're interested. You need to be more mysterious. You need to play it cool. Yeah. So when I had that belief that commitment was wrong, or like commitment was too intense, then I started to, of course, show up that way. Like, I started playing it cool, or not ever bringing up that conversation of like, what are we? But then after going through that, I realized that was not who I was. And I think it takes a lot of, like, that's really scary to realize, oh, I am someone that really wants commitment. And I'm no longer going to shame myself for wanting that. But then when you start to realize that, then you can show up differently, which means, oh, I'm not going to be available for people that don't want to define the relationship, or people that don't want to prioritize the relationship that we have, right? So it's like, it really does come from shifting our mindset, shifting our beliefs. But that is that gradual process, because what happens when we shift our beliefs, then our external world changes. That's when we get more evidence of like, oh, there are people out there that want commitment.
Which is when chemistry changes.
Yeah. So I hear you if you're the type of person that's like, I need evidence, right? But know that your external world will change as your internal world does. Yeah. And then also know that you don't need more confidence to try. You actually need more courage to start. Yeah. Because I hear this a lot of like, I should feel a certain way before I put myself out there, or before I end a relationship, or I need to have all of my ducks in order before I do something. But actually what you need is the courage to be messy and imperfect. Yeah. And just try and learn along the way, right? Because then you're not putting pressure on yourself to be perfect. You're not, maybe you're not either people pleasing then too, because you don't feel like you have to say yes to everything, right? So it's a process. Absolutely.
There's this, I think it's a quote by Tony Robbins, and he says, you don't know how far is too far until you've gone too far. And I think it is a beautiful quote. And in regards to this, if you're someone that's a people pleaser and then you put yourself first for the first time, it may feel so scary and your mind might be like, I think this is too far, like too much. But it's actually so powerful to test it out, to do it. You don't know where your zone of like, this is right for me is until you've actually played on both sides. And so it will feel like too far. A lot of the things, like it will feel like too much sometimes. It's because it's unnatural to you. And so once you've actually tested that strategy out and you actually find, oh, this is right for me, first you like have to test out both sides. So I think that's really powerful too.
Yeah, you don't know what you're capable of until you try, or like you stretch yourself, right? And you can notice that discomfort that you feel by trying something new and label that like, oh, that's fear. That's fear coming up. I'm leveling up. I'm trying something new. I'm entering a foreign and uncertain place. And so fear is obviously going to be here.
Yeah.
And like naming that versus maybe making it mean, oh, I'm not cut out for this. Like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm scared. That must mean that I'm not cut out for this, right? So notice the different mindset shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. I want to quickly check the time and make sure we're on point with everything. Oh, let me just see here. Yeah, perfect. We probably should wrap it up soon. I just want to quickly ask one more question. So say the women are in this affair situation and they're really not sure if it's something that will ever be, or if they really need to walk away, and they feel so torn because like ultimately he feels like the one. How do we determine like within ourselves what is right so that we can start taking action on those decisions moving forward?
Ooh, such a good question. And so I feel like there's so many levels to this. Well, just one, it's just like acknowledging where you're at and not making it wrong, like really giving yourself compassion and understanding, like this is a challenging situation to be in.
Yeah.
And then also asking yourself these tough questions. So action might actually be self-reflection of like taking stock of like, how are you feeling? What is it that you actually need? What is important to you? What are your values? Is this situation, is this relationship something that allows you to grow? Do you like yourself when you're in this situation or with this person? And then another thing would be to ask yourself is, what are some of the things that you feel either shy, silly, embarrassed, or timid to share with your partner?
Yes.
It might be, oh, I actually do have needs, or I really do want to be with you and it's bothering me that we're not together.
Yeah.
And really reflect on how those things are actually portals to the things that are really important to you. So like, do what you want with that information, but it's just like, okay, I'm feeling like I don't want to tell my partner that it hurts me that we are not together. So then get really curious about that. Like, well, why? Oh, commitment's actually really important to me. I feel safe and like I feel warm. I feel taken care of when someone is actively choosing to be with me. Oh, like that's important to me. So then we're really uncovering things that are important to you. Because it's so easy to say like, oh, it's just silly. I don't like it. I shouldn't want that. But then we're not getting to know ourselves and what our needs are when we discount the things that have been coming up maybe for years, right? Of like, absolutely. This is important to you, pay attention. This is important to you, pay attention. So asking yourself the question, what is it maybe that I feel like I'm holding back on? With the intention of uncovering the things that are important to you, which then will give you more information of like, is this something that I really want? Am I thriving in this? Do I like who I am in this?
Totally. Self-reflection is so powerful. And I think it's so easy to just get stuck in a loop in your head, but it's really important to actually go inquire within yourself and really reflect on a journal or some time alone. What I will do is I'll put all these questions down in a blog so that you have access to them, because it's really easy to just listen to this interview, but I'll pop it in a blog on my website so you can have access and really ask yourself those questions.
Oh, I have one thing about that too, because that's also a way that you can learn how to trust yourself, right? Is like create moments where you can hold space for yourself, whether that's journaling or doing like an audio recording on your phone, like talk through it and then listen to yourself or reread that journal entry, because you're going to start noticing like patterns or wisdom coming through. And this is again how you learn how to trust yourself. So like hold space for yourself. You have more wisdom than, than you think that you have. Give yourself more credit. And so I hope that you actually sit down and reflect and be honest with yourself and go through those questions. It's really hard to, but know that it's so worth it.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabby. The link to the blog usually comes out about a month later than the video. So I'll pop it down in the video. But thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I liked talking about this. This needs to be talked about so much more, because you're not alone in this. A lot of people have gone through this.
Yeah, it's just silence, but there's definitely people that are walking alongside you on this journey. Gabby, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I have my own blog too. You can find me at gabriellevaldes.com. I have a bunch of free resources too I even have a quiz, a simple quiz that helps you determine whether or not this person is good for you. So I can even share that with you, Kate, so we can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put it in the links below.
On Instagram, I have a newsletter too. So you can find me on my website.
Yeah, click the links below and they'll be all there.